Hey everyone, welcome to the GTM Pack podcast. I'm your host, Justin Dorfman, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Scott Sanchez, founder and chief storyteller at PMMTeam. Scott, how's it going? Thanks for joining us today.
It's going great. I really appreciate you having me on. Excited to be
I,
here.
yeah, I was really excited. I don't mean to date you or maybe even date myself, but I was trying to think about how long we've known each other, and it's almost 15 years now, if you can imagine. And uh, you know, just a little backstory. So the company that I was working at the time, 3Terra, that was my first gig outside of college. It was an internship, if I might say, like early cloud days, and really had a big impact on sort of my career. And I caught the startup bug essentially in that gig, and I know we worked closely together and had a lot of fun. So it was great reconnecting with you recently. I know you've done a lot of really interesting things since then. So definitely wanted to catch up, and maybe that's a good place to start. It would be great to give our listeners a little bit of a background on you, your career background, and sort of what brought you to this point today where you founded PMMTeam.
Yeah, thanks. And I do remember those days working together. I'm surprised to learn you were fresh out of college. I thought you were like 13, and they were just bringing their kid to work. But no, you were great back then, and how far we've both come. So, my story is very much I consider myself an unintentional chief marketing officer. Tried for a long time to avoid the title, starting my career as a software developer and still very much think about myself that way, but just realized super early I hated other people telling me what to build. I still hack on code. It's still a hobby of mine, but just didn't want to do it as a profession. But I did have a knack for explaining what tech was and how it worked and what people could do with it. And that sort of led me down this path of being a marketer, and have had various roles at startups and big companies, AWS and Cisco, and plenty of startups along the way. And what I realized is that the part of marketing that I really enjoy the most is the storytelling. It is the product marketing side. I think, again, coming from my developer background, marketing was like a dirty word. It was like, for a long time, don't call me the marketer. I'll run marketing. Just don't call me the marketing guy. Call me the janitor. I really don't care. Just not the marketer. A decade or so ago, I gave up that fight. But, it was really after I honed in on the reality that product marketing was what I really enjoyed doing. I'm good at the other parts of marketing. They're just not fulfilling to me. And so what I'm doing these days is to help other companies, big and small. I'm working with small venture-backed startups. I'm working with some of the largest publicly traded tech companies, on their messaging and positioning, and helping them craft the narrative and refine the story that is key to going out in the market. So that's my story, and that's what I'm working on with PMMTeam.
That's very cool. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about PMMTeam. I was checking out your website. It seems really interesting. Sort of what was the inspiration for starting it? You mentioned you worked at some of these really well-known companies. What was the problem that you started to see out there in the world when it came to storytelling that you thought, you know what, there needs to be a service where we solve this?
So in any, I'll say, moderately mature tech company, there's bound to be someone in the marketing team who is a good storyteller. Maybe it's the CMO. Maybe that's the only person. Maybe it's the head of product marketing. Maybe there's someone on the content team, or in a customer success kind of role. Someone has got to be a good storyteller. And the problem becomes that they are a bottleneck for all the content that needs to get created. Oh, we want to update the website. Oh, we want this sales collateral. Oh, we want this thing for an event, a partnership we're doing, a press release. So, there's an endless stream of, we have this mediocre content that we put together. Now it's even worse with ChatGPT, like 10xing the amount of content you can create. It's garbage. There's no story in it. It's facts, right? And so there's always a bottleneck of someone that has to polish up all those turds, just to be very blunt about it, right? Um, and so it's a hard thing to scale, because what needs to happen is when that, let's take a website, right? You're putting some new copy on the website, and someone looks at it and was like, oh, send this over to so and so they can give it some polish. Well, that sits in the queue for a few days, then it goes to that person. And what really needs to happen is that, let's just say the CMO, they need to coach the person that wrote it, a product marketer, a content marketer, someone, a product manager. Sometimes you need to coach them and say, well, here's how you make this better. Here's how you pull a story through it. But they don't have the time to do that. So they just make the changes and say, now publish it. And so that person never gets any better. And this cycle repeats. And so, having been in roles where I've led large product marketing teams, I've been a CMO and led large marketing teams, it was always the one thing that was really hard to scale. And so that was the premise behind the service. And rather than just doing it as straight consulting, I wanted to make it more approachable. A lot of product marketing consultancies out there, a lot of brand strategy kind of agencies, but they could quote you 50 grand to come do the work. And so I tried to bring it down to the point where it's much more approachable. $1,000 a month, you get a certain number of requests you can make each week, and turn them around quickly. And so that was sort of the goal, was to have a easy to understand product marketing coaching service that was approachable both in structure and price, essentially.
Yeah, that's the one thing that stood out to me in sort of checking out your website, is you had this emphasis on coaching over editing, right? You talked a little bit about that, but I'd love to sort of unpack that a little bit more. What's the reason for needing to coach versus editing? And do you find that folks push back on that? Are they just like, just tell me what to write? Or, how has that been received so far?
Yeah, certainly. And there are a lot of great editing and copywriting companies out there. Like, there are some that I use and highly recommend. But they do exactly that. They will take what you wrote and just polish it and give it back to you. And sometimes they don't necessarily pull through the story or help you figure out the story. They just improve it. And you can give it to ChatGPT and say, like, hey, I wrote this crappy thing. Can you make it less crappy? Yes. Is it going to resonate with your buyer? Is it going to really get across your differentiation? Or is it just going to tell people what you're selling them? And often it's the latter. So the coaching is the difference between getting more crisp about how you're saying it versus helping someone understand what they need to say. To make an analogy, like if you work in a restaurant and you're cooking the chicken, and every time you cook it, it burns. Well, if the head chef comes in and just cooks it for you and serves it to the patron, like, you're never going to get any better at cooking chicken, right? Or whatever you're cooking. And so they have to coach you. They have to teach you. They have to show you the technique to come up with something that will really delight people. And, if all you're doing is cooking it for them, they're never going to get better. It actually doesn't solve the problem that most marketing teams perpetually have. It doesn't matter if you have a 500-person marketing team or a 5-person marketing team, there's someone that's going to be a bottleneck in helping translate, features and function kind of marketing into storytelling.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that goes back to the scalability point that you made earlier, right? How are you going to scale this thing if there's that one person that can edit, right, and isn't sort of instilling all their wisdom and sort of best practices in the rest of the team. So it makes a lot of sense. And I love that aspect of the service. You probably at this point seen a ton of content, right? I'm curious to get your perspective on what are the most common mistakes you see folks making when it comes to storytelling?
I think that the first thing that I usually pick on, and I offered like a free coaching session Most of what I do is asynchronous. So people would submit a piece of content or a URL or a doc or something, and I'll do it offline. I'll record like a screen sharing video of me going through it with my feedback. I'll put some comments in the doc and send it back. But I also offer essentially a mock free trial, and usually it's people's website that we just pull up, and I'm like, okay, let's go through your website. Let me tell you my first impressions. I don't go beforehand and make a whole bunch of notes. I sort of do it right on the fly, the same way I would do any other coaching. And without fail, 2/3 of the website, maybe more, is really just here's what you will be buying, as opposed to here's what you get by using our service. Right. And so I just happen to have Asset Mule up here. Right. And so I think you guys are doing a great job. Create sales assets in minutes. Right. Not we sell you a template library and some tools. Right. But here's what you can accomplish with our product. And so you guys I'll give you an A. I reserve the right to change that as I scroll down here. But, I think talking about it in terms of solutions and use cases and outcomes is very hard for technically minded companies, especially if you have like if your founder is the product person, or if the product managers are doing a lot of the marketing today, right? And marketing's job is sort of just to publish it. You end up with speeds and feeds instead of customer outcomes. And so that's like the number one thing. I see it in all kinds of stuff. I was just looking at the new Meta Quest, like VR goggles. And even a company of that size who has a marketing team bigger than most companies, it was still just very feature function. It wasn't like, here's what you do with it. And maybe it was intentional on their behalf, but I think for most SaaS companies, most tech companies, it just comes down to like, tell people what they can accomplish, not how you accomplish it.
Yeah, I appreciate the A. I would be a little bit more self-critical on our website, and we're early on. So that's actually one thing that came to mind that I wanted to ask you is, when does storytelling become a big piece in the marketing strategy? And I think about it, and I think about our perspective, right? Obviously, when we started, we had a vision of what we wanted to build. So storytelling can begin from the very beginning of a company, right? But we did a ton of customer discovery, and obviously that vision evolved, and we learned a lot more about the market that we plan to operate in. And with that, the story of what we're building and how we're trying to solve or what we're trying to solve for people has evolved as well. So how do you see that sort of, when does it start, and how does it transition through the life of a company as it matures and grows?
Yeah, I think storytelling is like a broad umbrella of activities. And it starts with getting crisp about just how you tell people what you do, right? We help people create sales assets in minutes. Oh, well, tell me more, right? And so, what starts as sort of a hook turns into the opportunity to then tell a story. And I'm a big fan of the 3-act narrative: setup, conflict, resolution. In your case, like, the setup is sales teams have a tremendous amount of assets. They constantly need to create unique things for particular pitches that they're delivering. And so the conflict then is that this is really hard, and it's, things get out of date really easy. Every sales rep is going to make their slides look completely different and sometimes terrible, or say the wrong things that marketing doesn't want. They don't have the tools to do it, right? I'm probably butchering your pitch here, but I'm just trying to lay it out. So there's like setup, what you're trying to do. There's the conflict, what's in the way. And I like to think about that in like a old way, new way, old game, new game kind of thing. And props to Andy Raskin. If you're not familiar with Andy, Raskin, he's sort of popularized this idea of strategic narrative. So I've been using, long before I'd heard of Andy Raskin, I've been doing this sort of old way, new way in the story. And then you have your resolution. And of course, the resolution is that you and your product are uniquely qualified to solve this conflict. Like only you can help get them to this new vision for how they solve this problem, right? And I think it's exceptionally rare to see that kind of structure and payoff in a sales pitch. It's usually like, well, we started this company 2 years ago because my partner and I had this problem and we wanted to solve this thing. And so now we're 17 people and we've raised some money and we have this product. And let me dive in and tell you. And we have 4 customers and here's their logos, and or 400 customers and here's their logos. And now now let me show you the product and all the features, right? Okay. I mean, that's one way to do it. Do I feel connected to it? Do I feel engaged with it? Do I feel like I could see myself and my problem in that conflict? And do I see how you can resolve it for me? Not really. And so then the conversation is just about features. It's just about functions. It's just about price. It's just about something else because there's no emotion in it. And I think that's what so many teams miss in their pitch. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a 2-person startup or a 200,000 person tech company. It's the same problem.
Yeah, it seems like in recent years, the topic of storytelling has become really popular. And I know there's a bunch of books that have come out and frameworks like you mentioned. I'm curious to get your perspective on why you think that's the case. Like, why has suddenly storytelling become such a big thing, particularly in the B2B tech space, right? I think, in B2C,
it works.
Yeah.
Because it works, like plain and simple. Like, what was the last movie that you really enjoyed sitting through 2 hours of that didn't have a story?
Right.
Like, right. There's plenty of movies that we watch that we get about 20 or 30 minutes in, and we're like, what the hell is this about? Right? That's every single tech pitch that all of these IT buyers have to sit through every week, where a salesperson comes in and isn't there to tell them a story, isn't there to engage them, is just there to say, we sell this thing, it costs this much money, it has these features. And so, I think you're getting more and more sophisticated marketers and sellers that are recognizing, hey, I can outsell, I can outmarket my competitors by just telling a better story. And when I say story, I don't mean lie. I mean, like, figure out a way to take the thing that you solve for these companies, these people, and turn it into a narrative that gets them excited. One of the examples that I like to use is when Steve Jobs was on stage announcing FaceTime, right? You think way back when you were 5 and he got up on stage and announced FaceTime. He didn't do what a traditional tech company might have done, which was to say, hey, we put this HD camera in here and we've built new codecs for our video. And we've done this, and you can get 30 frames a second on your phone, video conferencing. No, they showed a parent in a hotel room on their phone having a video call with their young child and the other parent at home, and everybody was like, oh, I get it now, right? Like they tugged on the emotional side of like, setup, I'm traveling, conflict, I can only have a phone call with my kid, resolution, holy crap, like, I don't know if this is a PG podcast, I'll try and keep it PG. But like, that is an example of how they delivered that, showed you and made you feel, yes, I understand. Whether or not you were a parent didn't matter. Like, I understand the utility of this. I understand how I could use this and why I want to line up outside in the cold to go buy this thing when it comes out, right? And I think I could probably count on one hand the number of tech companies that have ever made me feel that way. That's storytelling.
Yeah, that's actually the next question I was going to ask you is I remember that, and you're totally right. The sort of emotional connection that they made it stand out and made you just understand it wasn't technology anymore, right? It was you know a problem and a solution, right? Um, what are some other good companies? Everybody points to Apple. Everybody points to sort of stories like that.
Because
Who else is
there's
out
so
there?
few good ones.
Yeah, who else is out there that's doing a good job? And don't mean to put you on the spot, but who do you think is doing a good job with their storytelling?
Um,
I'll
so
throw one out there real quick. I saw recently a really great Airbnb sort of ad that sort of especially coming out of the pandemic and being locked in and all that stuff, and sort of opening up the opportunity of exploring the world again. That really like got me excited, right? And it had me thinking about where am I gonna go next? Where do I want to go? So that was one that comes top to mind.
I will say that a lot of I think that B2C kind of companies,
Mm.
and not that Airbnb doesn't sell to businesses or Apple doesn't sell to businesses, but like sort of these B2C native companies um, tend to do a better job. Like, the campaigns are longer, they're broader, and so you can hire um, bigger thinking marketers that spend more time building this out before you launch it, because you're going to put it on a million billboards, every TV. Like, you're going to run these campaigns for a year. And in the B2B world, especially in the SaaS world, you don't have the timelines or budget to do that usually, unless you're Microsoft or Salesforce or something, right? Um, and so there's not a lot of great examples in the B2B space, and I think that's why it's such an opportunity, right? So like if you're 10% better at storytelling than your competitor, that could translate into like a 10x return on investment, right? And I'm making up these numbers, but it is that startling when you start to have a story that resonates with your buyers, and your competitor's still stuck sort of talking about speeds and feeds. Like it really can be that impactful. One person I wanted to call out is Dave Gerhardt, who was at Drift, and he's been all over the place. But he started a community called Exit Five, for marketers and really B2B marketers. His podcast is great. I would say check Dave and Exit Five out. I think he's not. I wouldn't call him the storytelling guy, but he definitely tugs at the utility of it, and has a bunch of resources and other things that I would point people to.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Dave Gerhardt, and have learned a lot from his podcast and his community. So that's definitely a good call out. I'm curious, do you think that the C-level understands the importance of storytelling? You mentioned, I mean, I know you admitted it was a made up stat, but that if your storytelling is 10% better, it can have an impact on the business. Do you think the C-level thinks about it in that way, generally speaking? And how, if you were a marketer trying to position storytelling as something worth investing in, how would you go about doing that?
It is hard to quantify. Like I haven't come up with a great metric yet, other than just making stats up at a thin air. That's always great. I do think that one thing I hear from C-level execs, whether it's other CMOs or CROs and CEOs, um, they can't tell me what a great story looks like, but they know it when they see it. And what I hear a lot is, our stories just not landing, or our story is out of date because we've changed the company or the product so much, or people think about us like this, but now we sell this, and we need them to change how they think about us. So like there's a broad recognition when the story's not right. Um, but if it was easy, they would just lock the executive team away for a few days and come out with a new story, right? And so that's sort of back to, this is creative work. Like this isn't this isn't science. This is art. And I think that that is lost on a lot of executives that are like, oh, we need to fix our story. Sure, great. Let me go paint the Mona Lisa and come up with your story all at the same time, because that's essentially what it is like to try and not just come up with something that is elegant and resonates, but then to get all the very highly opinionated stakeholders across the company to align around it. And I think that's always the biggest challenge. Is it's coming up with a story is easy. Coming up with the story is hard, and getting stakeholders to align around it where you still end up with something that feels like a good story is what makes it super challenging for most companies. And they just sort of give up along the way. They're like, it's good enough, right? This is what we could get consensus on. It's good enough. When in reality, what you need is a strong marketing, product, sales, CEO, someone that can say, no, this is uncomfortable. And that's why we're going to lean into it. Because this is a differentiated story. This is a story that's going to resonate with our buyers. With, we're going to plant our flag and march towards this for the next year. That's a hard decision to make. Like, no one wants to break what's working by trying something new, and as a result, you sort of a lot of companies end up with just very mediocre messaging.
Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I got one more question, and I have to ask this one. It's the AI question, right? And you touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'm curious to get your take on, what role does AI play in this, and how should you be leveraging AI, if you should be, and how shouldn't you? And obviously, the obvious sort of like AI helps you produce a ton of content, but I'm assuming that's not the answer, right? That's not how you should be using it. So I'd love to sort of get your perspective on what place it should have in your storytelling strategy.
So you can think of having a good story, and story is sort of shorthand for like messaging and positioning and strategic narrative and all the things we're talking about. But what I have seen is that companies who have nailed that and have a good messaging framework that they can lean on, you can feed that into ChatGPT and say, here's our story. Here's who we are. Here are the non-negotiables as we describe what we do. And I need a piece of content that talks about X, Y, and Z, right? And you can use that in your prompts, and it will come out with something that takes that input and turns it around. If you don't have that, then it really is garbage in, garbage out. And yes, you can crank out a ton of low quality content that is probably of no more value than if you had an intern who had never heard about your company write, but was an amazing writer, go write some product marketing stuff for me. It's like, it'll be written well, just won't say anything that you care about, right? And I think that's a lot of what I'm seeing. And this is not a dig on product managers, but it is similar to a lot of what you see from product managers that don't have any product marketing experience, where it's just like, it does this and this and this and this and this, and here's how much it costs, and here's how you buy it, right? It's like very matter of fact. And sometimes that's exactly the piece of collateral you need, but it's rare, right? And so then it requires a lot of polish and a lot of editing to get it to the point where it is the thing you need.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. This has been awesome. I could talk about this forever. I love this stuff. So we'll definitely have to have you on again to dive deeper. But in the meantime, if folks want to learn more about you or follow you along in your journey, all the advice that you put out there in the world, learn more about PMMTeam, where's the best place for them to follow you?
If you want to find me, you probably best is LinkedIn. If you just type Scott Sanchez, marketing, CMO, something, it'll probably bring me up. And then PMMTeam, somehow I got the domain name PMMTeam.com. So you can check me out there and contact me through there if you want as well.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. Scott, thanks for coming on and have a great day.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Justin.